Hi, everybody. My name's Roger. I'm an alcoholic, and I'm happy to be here this evening with the Serenity Improvement Group. I guess it's now becoming the world famous Serenity Improvement Group. I think it's remarkable what those guys have done with the number of speakers they're able to put on. I think it's a great thing. I have to admit that I'm a little nervous, a little intimidated by it. My usual audience when I speak is maybe 10 to 15 guys at the Salvation Army, half of which are generally nodding out and falling asleep. So, if any of you want to make me feel comfortable, you can just close your eyes halfway through and I'll feel like I'm at home. Um, I Alcoholics Anonymous is very, very important to me. It is probably the most important thing in my life, and I've got to start with that because it's true. I wouldn't have much of a life. I certainly wouldn't have the life I'm living if it wasn't for AA. AA saved my marriage, saved my career, my job when I was working. I'm retired now. Those of you who aren't retired, I hope you get here. It's a wonderful thing. I love it. Um, but I remember when I got to rehab, they have some education components to it. I remember they said, you have a disease. You have a disease of alcoholism, and I had not heard that before. And the way they explained it, they said this disease that we have is primary, and trying to remember the order. It's primary, chronic, progressive, incurable, and usually fatal. Most people who have alcoholism die from it. And I remember when I heard that, I thought that is a hell of an exaggeration. I do not believe that. That seems way overblown. But since I've been here, I've been to plenty of funerals of people a lot younger than me. I don't mean to get morbid, but it's like when we say Alcoholics Anonymous saved my life, it sounds a little overblown, a little maybe trite sometimes because it's said so often. But Alcoholics Anonymous saved my life. If I had not come here when I did, I wouldn't be here. So anyway, I'm very grateful. I'm grateful to my core for AA, and I think AA is real important, and um, it's almost everything to me. But anyway, um, just to tell you a little bit about Stephen mentioned where we know each other from, but my home group is the How It Works Men's Group. We meet at 7:30 on Saturday mornings. Get 100 guys at that hour. I think it's the best home group in the world. I was taught that if you don't think your home group is the best home group in the world, either do something to make it better or find a new home group. But anyway, I love that group. And my my sobriety date is January 5th, 1989. I have a sponsor. Dave P is my sponsor. Dave's first sponsor, Tom B, passed away, and after not very long, Dave got another sponsor, Tom P. Who, I sponsor guys. The guys that I sponsor guys, and there's a certain elegance to that, an order to it. I like when we go to meetings. There's a couple guys that we share the same sponsor, and there's guys that I sponsor, and the guys that they sponsor are there, and it's just a nice way to do the deal, I find. Um, just to tell you a little bit about my family and my drinking and what I was like. Um, I'm the only child my parents ever had, which is at once a blessing and a curse, I guess. You get lots of attention, you know, but it also, not that I needed any instruction in this, but it really reinforces and teaches you how to be selfish. That's for sure. The other thing about being an only child is that you're lonely a lot, and the loneliness, especially at the end of my drinking, got pretty severe. So my parents were very good people, very nice people, hardworking people. They were drinkers. My father never diagnosed himself as an alcoholic. I think most of you looking at him and how he drank, you would conclude that he was an alcoholic, but self-diagnosed disease. He never found the rooms. I wish he had. He was a binger. But growing up in the house that I grew up in, whenever anybody came over, anybody visited the house, you'd get whenever company came over, as soon as they walked in the door, you'd hand them a drink. And then they'd have another one and another one and another one and another one, and they'd drink until they left. And it was like that all the time. I mean, with everyone, always. I don't think I ever saw uh, my father or mother serve iced tea or lemonade to a grown up. I mean, it was alcohol. And you know how often we sit around the tables of AA, we say that, well, I never felt like I didn't feel like I fit in. I didn't belong. I didn't feel connected. I felt separated and apart from all the different ways that we describe the dis-ease that is alcoholism. Well, I had that. I had that disease, dis-ease to my core, and I never felt good. And one day, some of the guys in the neighborhood got some beers. I was 14. A lot of us started at 14. I was 14. Some guys got some beers, and we went to the trees, the fields next to the town park, and I had probably 3 beers, no more than 4 for sure, and I just loved it. I mean, it was magic. It was the first time in my life. I mean, I didn't float or anything, but it was the first time in my life that I ever felt as good as other people looked like they felt. And I chased it. I chased that. That summer, we I was a hanger on at the beginning, and time I became the ringleader. I was the guy making the calls to make sure we had some beers for the night. I mean, we were drinking outside, so I mean, if it rained, we didn't go out. But other than rainy nights, we drank every night that summer, except for one night. There was those of you might remember, some of you might remember the old TV show, The Fugitive, David Jansen. And that summer, the last whatever day of the week it was in August, was going to be the final episode of the show, and he was going to catch, going to see the one-armed man, and they were going to resolve the whole story. And so we all stayed home and we watched it because I mean, there were no VCRs, there was no DVRs, there was no way to record TV. If you missed the broadcast, you didn't see it. So. But that was the only night we missed. Well, that summer that I just described was already the beginning of the end of my social drinking. When school started that year, I had some guys that I knew. We met some girls, and they had a house with a empty apartment flat upstairs, and one of the girls got their brother to buy us some booze, and we had I think a pint of gin and a quart of rum, or the other way around, whatever it was. But up until that point, all I ever drank was beer. So I drank a half a pint of rum and probably more than that of the gin in about a half an hour. And I got drunk. I mean, I got really drunk. And these guys, my wonderful friends, taking care of me, they put me on a bus and they let me go home alone. But I remember at the front door, I opened the door and I fell into the hallway, and my mother's, saying, "What's wrong with you? What's wrong with you?" I got up and I fell backwards in the kitchen. And I fell forward in it was a mess. And I woke up Saturday afternoon, there was puke all over the pillowcase, and I felt horrible. I did not feel better until Sunday night. And I remember saying to myself, I am never, ever doing this again. This is not worth it. It's not fun. And I was drunk 2 weekends later. And already at that early time in my teens, I had to, I was already losing the ability to control my drinking. I mean, it wasn't constant yet, but I mean, it was there. I just didn't know. I didn't know if when I started, if I'd have 2 or 3 and be able to go home, or just keep drinking until I passed out, which was something I did. So it was, I was in school. I went to an all boys Catholic high school, which I don't know if many people do that anymore these days, but we had a lot of fun. In those days, it was a lot of fun. And everybody was drinking before the dances and before the football games, and I started smoking weed. We all started smoking weed, and I don't talk about drugs much in AA, but it is a big part of my story. The way I look at it. I don't know if I'm a drug addict. I know I'm an alcoholic. My drug use may have just been a manifestation of my alcoholism. I don't know. I can't tell, but I know that Dr. Silkworth talks about alcohol in any form, and I know he means the alcohol that doesn't get cooked out of a dish or NyQuil or mouthwash or something like that. I drink plenty of mouthwash. Um, I know that's what he means, but I look at all the dope stuff as alcohol in any form too, because that's how it was with me. But I got through school and I went to college locally, and I was, from all appearances, I was a pretty good kid, at least it looked that way. I became a daily drinker and drug user by the time I was 20, but I worked hard. I carried a full load. I got through college in 4 years, which we all did back then. I don't think people do that now, but we got through in 4 years. Went full time. I had three jobs. I was selling shoes at a plaza. It wasn't a mall yet. It was a plaza. Selling shoes at a shoe store. I worked at a bar. It was a local fish fry bar nearby that uh, they were busy on Friday and Saturday nights. So I went in on Saturday and Sunday morning. I cleaned up, cleaned the bathrooms, did the empties, filled the coolers, that stuff. And I worked and my recollection was that the ladies' room was a lot worse than the men's room the next morning. Um, and I worked at a mass production bakery. There's regional bakeries all over the country used to make Wonder Bread and Hostess cakes. I worked in the cake shop, so my job was the mixer. Now bakers work odd hours, to ship, to get the product out the door, you got to work all night, that kind of thing. So, I had shifts like 11 to 7 or 3 in the morning till 11:30, and a lot of times I went to work and I was either still drunk or definitely hungover, still high, or maybe more than a little high. And you're trying to do the job. And I used to mix a 500-pound bowl of cake batter every 11 minutes, and it would get sucked into the machinery. And we make the cupcakes and everything. And the second batch that I mixed this one night, I hear the alarm going off, and the supervisor's running in, and everybody says, "What the hell did you do?" I mean, all the cake was coming out flat. And I was loaded. I mean, I was not thinking clearly. So, I forgot the baking powder. So for the next night, instead of learning, you know what I'm going to say. Instead of learning not to go to work drunk or high, I put a sign on the mixer: "Don't forget the baking powder." I mean, that's how we are. Resilient and uh, resourceful. Um, but I got through school. I got finished. I got married young. I guess it's young by today's standards. I was 22. Um, I married a wonderful woman. I'm still married to her by the grace of God. Her name is Charlotte. She's the love of my life. And her father owned a liquor store. People always used to tease me that's why I married her, which was kind of silly, I guess. But they didn't know how to drink in that family. I mean, they were not like my family. He had my father-in-law John. He had a liquor cabinet in the family room that all that was in it was stuff that didn't sell in the store. If somebody had a stomach ache, they'd have a little blackberry brandy, right? But they didn't drink like I did. And, we were kind of old fashioned. We did not live together before we got married. So when we got married, after we were together for several months, my wife looked at me one day and she says, "Don't you ever drink soda or juice or water? What's the matter with you?" And I said, "Well, I'm an adult. I drink adult beverages." I was trying to convince her that the way I drank and the way I lived was normal. You know what I'm saying. And she, I think probably the worst thing that I did, there's all kinds of stories. I mean, I'm not going to go through the silliness. Well, one night I fancied myself to be kind of a cook. I hope my friend Jim is on the thing. He's a chef. I'm not much of a cook. I know how to make three things. So we invited these people over, and I was drinking all day while I was preparing the meal. So everybody arrived, and they sat down, had the first course, and there was a little bedroom in the back of the apartment that had an extra couch in it. And I got up from the table and I went and I laid down on the couch and I passed out. Had a house full of people, food's on the stove, and they couldn't make me move, It was stuff like that. And I'm talking about early 20s. I was acting like this. One thing that I guess the worst thing for my wife is I was not home. I was out a lot, and I left her alone a lot. And she didn't sign up for that, but that's what she got. And we say that alcoholism is a progressive disease, and it's a progressive disease. I mean, it kept getting worse as the years went by. I was drinking more and more, and using more and more, and my life got very, very small. I couldn't tell anybody how I was living. I was the faking and pretending that I was normal. I was leading a normal life, trying to hold it together. It's kind of like you get to work in the morning and somebody says, "Oh, how are you?" And you say, "Oh, well, I'm okay, I guess." I had to get up 3 times in the middle of the night. I know it's February, it's winter, but I had to go out in the garage in my underwear, take a couple of swigs of whiskey so I could get back to sleep. Um, it's not exactly the kind of thing it's not water cooler conversation, I couldn't tell anybody how I was living. And it got bad. I was, I had visions. I remember, I'd go to leave my office on Tuesday afternoon for an appointment, and nobody would see me until Thursday. And maybe, be calling my wife, and she didn't know where I was. And I remember the one day sitting in the boss's office, and he's looking at me, and he's going, "Where the hell were you?" And you don't have an answer, It was a sweet moment that I hope to never experience again. Um, but as it does, we as everything went along, I got to a point. I was a daily drinker, so binging was not really in my wheelhouse necessarily. But I went on a 5-day binge, and I got to work, and I had promised one of my partners that I was going to do something over the weekend, and I completely forgot about it. I blew it off. And she was asking me about it. She came in. She said, "Did you do what we talked about?" And until she said that, I didn't remember at all. I said, "No, I didn't." And it was important. And she started yelling at me. And I'm like most alcoholics. I don't like to be yelled at. So I started yelling back at her. I said, "Well, you don't know what it's like for me. You know what my life is like." And she said, "Why don't you tell me what your life is like?" And I don't know where these words came from, but I said, "I think I'm an alcoholic and a drug addict." And she said, "Are you asking for help?" I said, "Yeah, I think so." And she said, "It's about time." They all knew there was something wrong with me. Now, surprisingly, most of them didn't know it was drinking and drugs. They just knew that, some days I was friendly and kind and reliable, and other days you'd say good morning to me and I'd bite your head off. Probably because I was up all night and I hadn't slept. It was They arranged through some anyway. In about 3 or 4 days, I was in detox. And I remember when I got to detox, the intake counselor was the first guy ever that I had told the truth to. I told him, he said, what do you drink? How much do you drink? I told him. And what drugs you use? And I told him. He looked at me, he says, "All at once?" I go, "Yeah." He said, "You're lucky you're not dead." Um, he said, "Do you want to stop?" And I said, "I don't know. I don't know if I can. I don't know if I can live without it." He said, "Well, you're in the right place." So they wanted to give me Librium, and one of the things I abused was tranquilizers. I had these big bottles of 10 Vs, the blue Valiums, and I used to love those. And they wanted to give me Librium, and I said, "No, I came here to get clean, sober. I'm not, I don't want anything." After the second day, when I was shaking, I welcomed the Librium, and I had my dancing partner, my IV pole that I had to walk around with, and After about 4 days, I was starting to stabilize a little medically, and the same counselor came down to see me. He said, "I'm going to tell you about the rehab that we've got." He says, "The treatment center floor is up on 4." He said, "And once you get out of here," I said, "I just want to tell you a little bit about the program." And I looked at him and I said, "Rehab?" I said, "I don't need rehab." I said, "We're making way too much of this." I said, "I know I overshot the mark this time, but I'll be fine. I don't," and he's grinning at me, and he said, "Look," he said, "I don't know you." He says, I talked to you for 20 minutes the other day, but he said, "Let me tell you what I see." He goes, "You're a people-pleasing, procrastinating perfectionist. You're an egomaniac with an inferiority complex. You feel like a loser. You're dying of loneliness, and you're too proud to ask anybody for help." And he said, "Right now, more than anything, you want to go home and have a drink." And I looked at him and I said, "Bingo, you know, how'd you know?" And he says, "Well, I wasn't talking about you." He says, "I was talking about me." He says, "You just nodded in all the right places." Um, and this particular counselor, and I have no problem with the CACs, the Certified Alcoholism Counselors, or whatever that stands for. The people who are trained to help us, the well-meaning, good people who work in treatment. They help a lot of people, and they help me. But this guy, besides being a treatment guy, a treatment counselor, he was a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous for 12 years. And he said, "Look, I'm going to tell you the truth." He says, "Because you're going to hear a lot of crap when you're in here." He said, "I'm going to tell you the truth." He says, "This disease of alcoholism that we have," he said, "there's no treatment for it. There's really nothing we can do for you medically." He says, "We're going to give you some vitamins," and he says, "and make you pee in a cup to make sure nobody's sneaking anything into you. We'll give you 3 square meals a day and everything." And he says, "In 28 days," he says, "you will get out of here and you'll be cleaner. And on the surface, you will appear to be in better shape." He says, "But you'll be just as nuts as you were the day you got here." He said, "The only hope you have," he says, after you're on the unit for a couple days," he said, "we're going to start taking you out in that blue van you saw in the parking lot to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous in the community." And he says, "And if you got any hope of living a decent life," he says, "you're going to find somebody at those meetings you can hang on to." He said, "Because we try to be diplomatic. We try to say that all that, A does not have a monopoly on recovery, that people recover in church and some people recover on their own." And maybe that's true, you know. But he said, for alcoholics of our type, he said, Alcoholics Anonymous is the only thing that works. He says, "So try to find something there and hang on to it for dear life, because it's really the only chance you have." And I don't know why I listened to him. I didn't listen at that point in my life. I wasn't listening to anybody. The saying, you can tell an alcoholic, but you can't tell them much, right? So I just didn't want to hear anything. But I listened to this guy, and when they went to the meetings, and I liked the meetings. I was attracted to us. People were talking about things, the way they drank, the way they lied. I opened up my mouth, a lie would fall out. Well, I wasn't alone. I was sitting around a table. I heard people telling. So people were talking about things that I couldn't imagine they were talking about in front of other people. But it was the kind of thing that I had felt my whole life, and I'd never been able to put words to. It attracted me, and I thought, maybe, just maybe, this could work. So I got out, and it was this time of year. It was in February. My wife picked me up. She was hardly talking to me, but she drove me home. And I got home, and it snowed that day. And again, like any self-respecting alcoholic, the snowblower had been broken for 3 or 4 years. I never could get around to fixing it. So she said, "Why don't you go out and shovel the driveway, make yourself useful?" And she said, "I'm going to run to the store." So she went to the grocery store, and I'm alone and at home. And, like any self-respecting alcoholic, I didn't really throw out everything. Behind the workbench, there was a bottle of vodka that I'd received as a Christmas gift. It was Smirnoff Silver 100. I remember the label. And I wasn't much of a vodka drinker. I like brown more than clear, rare in AA, but I really like whiskey. Bourbon and scotch, and anyway, so I got this bottle of vodka in my hand, and I'm home 10 minutes. I got determined I'm going to change my life. This is it, man. I'm going to, I had my big book. I had my 24-hour book. I had my schedule. I was, determined that this is going to be different. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. I said, holy shit, this is what it means to be powerless over alcohol. So I did what they tell, what they recommend that you do. I called an old timer, this guy, Dan, who got out of rehab 2 weeks before me. Um, and he said, you got a long cord on that phone? This is before we had cordless phones in the house. He said, you got a long cord on that phone? I said, yeah. He goes, okay, pull it over to the sink. I want to hear it. Glug, glug, open the bottle, pour it out, rinse the bottle, rinse the sink. He said, you got any weed? And I said, yeah. He says, okay, go throw it in the toilet. Let me hear the toilet flush. He said, okay, now flush it again because I know there's some shit floating around. You're going to pick it out, dry it out, try to smoke it later. He said, flush. And he says, and I'll pick you up at 7 o'clock and we're going to a meeting. And I got the first step that day. I mean, it's not a permanent, you don't get it permanently, but I got it. The powerless over alcohol, the words weren't just words anymore. The meaning hit me because I was determined. I am not going to drink. And when I was alone with that bottle, it spoke to me in a way I couldn't believe the power of it. So I started doing what you told me to do because I was afraid not to do what you told me to do. That was my main motivation was just fear. I did not want to go back to living the way I was living. And so I got on my knees in the morning, and I remember I was in this room. I'm in the dining room of our house. That's why, I didn't want my wife to see me. So came to the front of the house, knelt down next to this table, and I asked God for a sober day. And it did not feel like the words were going past the ceiling. It felt very silly, but I was afraid not to do it. So I kept doing it. And little by little, I was going to group. I was going to aftercare. I had an individual counselor. I was going to probably 2 or 3 meetings a week, but I counted all those other things as meetings too. So I can only spend so much time on recovery. I got to get my job back. I got it. I got a lot of catching up to do. And I was miserable, as you might expect. And it was probably. I don't know, maybe 6 months. I just mentioned this one guy. I said, I really feel better when I go to the meetings. He said, so go to the meetings. Go to the meetings. He said, look, I'm not saying all that other stuff isn't important. A lot of people get help from that, and I'm sure you're getting some help from it. But he says, Alcoholics Anonymous is what you need. And I started, I was having trouble with the second step. It tells us that, we have some of us try to hold on to our old ideas, right? And we all have old ideas. They're different. Our ideas are different, but my old idea was that I could not ask God to help me because God was mad at me. Every gift he ever gave me, I had squandered. I wasted everything he ever gave me. If I was God, I wouldn't help a guy like me, ungrateful jerk, you know. And I had this idea that I had to make myself good, or at least better than I was. I had the arrogance to think that I had the power to fix me. I thought I had to fix myself, shiny, and then go to God and say, ain't I a good boy? And don't I merit your love or something? I don't know, whatever. What stupid ideas. And I remember I'm sure some of you might remember the old Tape of the Month Club from Dykob, Bellevue, Nebraska. They used to send out these tapes, and I used to get these tapes, and this I was listening to one. You used to put them in the cassette deck in your car, and you drive around and listen to speakers. And I'm listening to this woman. Her name was Jane. I remember it distinctly, and she said, she says, God's grace is greater than any hurt you have. He meets you right where you are. He'll come down in the pit with you. You do not have to get good to go to God. You do not. Go to him now. And I'm sure I'd heard that 15 times at meetings, but you don't hear it till you hear it. And I heard it, and I started. I don't know. I started coming to believe, but whatever. I had a little bit more faith that maybe this will work. Now, that first year was I actually felt like I was on a prison sentence. This abstinence did not feel good, and I wasn't recovering, so I was suffering. And the fear. I mean, I was afraid of everything. I was afraid of living, really. I was afraid of making mistakes. I was afraid of everything, and self-absorbed, um, self-involved, self. And finally, the emotional pain gets to be enough, and you know what I'm talking about. I finally asked this guy to be my sponsor, and he's still my sponsor. But he said, "Come and meet me at my office this one morning." So I went there, and I talked to him about the first step, some of the stuff I told you, and about the second step, and before we were done, we got down on our knees in his office, and we said the third step prayer. He knew it by heart. I had to read it, but held hands, said the third step prayer, and after I was done, uh, he handed me a yellow pad and a pencil, and he said, that part in the book that says the decision you just made will have little permanent effect unless at once followed by a taking a look, facing the obstacles, taking a look at ourselves. He says, you got to go write your inventory. And again, I am a person who analyzes and overthinks, and why should I do this? And I know I'm not unique in that regard, by any stretch of the imagination. But I had a little bit of compliance in me that you're telling me to do it, I'm going to do it. Because I told him, I said, I'll do whatever it takes because I don't want to feel like this anymore. I do not want to feel like this anymore. So I wrote the inventory, and now when I sponsor guys, I remember the big deal I made out of that first inventory. I tell guys now, look, I says, if you're doing brain surgery and you're cutting into some guy's frontal lobe, you better be perfect. But when you're a newcomer in Alcoholics Anonymous, writing your first fourth step, done is better than perfect. Just do it. And I get him started. I said, look, your resentments, start with your mother and your father and your partner and your exes and your boss and your siblings and your neighbors, and that'll get you going. And your fears, what are you afraid of? Your fear of intimacy, and fear of abandonment, and fear of failure, fear of success. He says, just start writing. Your sex conduct, well, you know what you did, and your selfishness and your relationships, just start writing. And I tell people this stuff, and I'll tell you, I think I was sober 2 years, 2.5 years, and I was going to give a guy a medallion, anniversary thing at a meeting, Looport Group, which is about 30 miles from here. And I was been feeling shitty. I mean, just not good for days. I'm just low and dark and morose and all this stuff. And so I went to the meeting. It was a great meeting. I mean, I said a lot of nice things about my buddy, and he said a lot of nice things about me, and everybody was friendly. And I'm driving home, and I'm going over the Grand Island bridge near here, and tears are running down my face, and all I want to do is stop and jump off the bridge. And I called Dave the next morning, my sponsor, and told him what happened. And he says, when you say those prayers, you ask God to help you. He says, you know what God is saying? Go to the doctor. And so I went to the doctor, and he put me on antidepressant medication. And every now and then I hear people at tables of AA saying, that's cheating. You're taking medicine. You ain't sober. And I always look at them and say, where did you go to medical school? Show me your degree. Where was your psychiatry residency that you're giving medical advice at tables of AA? And we know the difference. I mean, if somebody's smoking weed every day, or somebody's using Klonopin and Xanax to excess, I mean, you know what it's like when people are abusing. But if you're prescribed an SSRI so you don't jump off bridges, yeah, you maybe should take those. That's personal editorial. That's not AA, that's me. But that was my experience. I went to, after I was sober about a year, my wife said to me, Oh, this is great. She says, you're sober. She says, you're out every fucking night like before. I don't usually use any profanity when I'm at an AA podium, but that's what she said, you know. And so I started finding some daytime meetings, and I found this group, the Eye Opener group, meets 7 days a week at 7:30 in the morning. And I went to that group almost every day for the first 4 years, or for the after that first year. For the next 4 years, I went to that group every day, and it saved my ass. I don't know, wherever you live, if you've got a daily meeting, that's great for newcomers. You know what I mean? The power of that group was incredible. Well, one day I'm sitting at that meeting, and I was about 5 years sober at the time, I think. And this young lady started making eyes at me, and I started making eyes at her. And I left my wife of 20 years and moved in with this young lady that I met at the beginners table. I was 41, she was 26. The math seemed to work. She had a baby boy that was born. The father of that baby died 3 months before the baby was born. She had like a 4-month-old baby. He was adorable. And my wife and I were not able to have any kids. And all of a sudden, I've got this ready-made family, and I got to get on my horse, the White Knight, on the horse. I'm going to go and rescue and fix everybody. And after, I think, well, what do you think? How long? Don't take bets. How long do you think it lasted? It lasted about 2 months. And I had signed a lease for a year, so that year I was paying her rent for the apartment. I was paying my wife's mortgage. I was paying my rent, and I was eating macaroni and cheese and Cheerios. It was a very high carb year, but I learned some stuff. I learned some stuff about getting honest with yourself and about looking at your selfishness and your self-centeredness. And I hurt my wife deeply with all of this, and I hurt that woman too, you know. And I learned some things. I learned, that, and this is just from my own experience. You can take it with however many grains of salt you want. But if you're married, uh, be married. You want to be married, be married. If you want to run around and go out with people, then don't be married. Don't pretend that you got a sign around your neck that says I'm available when you're not available. Um, it's better to get out of one relationship completely before you get into the next one. A lot of people will audition number two while they're still with number one. It works for some people, but it doesn't work for most of them because you don't know yourself. I learned a lot during that time. My wife and I were separated for 3 years. I knew I wanted to get back with her after a few months, but she wasn't crazy enough to let me in the house. So she knew I was nuts. So we worked hard. There was a lot of forgiveness and a lot of healing and a lot of work. And there came a point where I ran into a buddy of mine, and he says, "So how you doing? Are you guys getting a divorce? Are you reconciling? You moving back in? It's been a couple of years already." I said, "No, it's been almost 3 years." He said, "Well, what are you doing?" I said, "Well, we've worked through a lot of issues and everything." I said, "But I think we need some couples counseling, and that's the last thing. We need some help getting through some issues." And he said to me, "Well, how does Charlotte feel about that?" I said, "Well, she didn't have a real good time in therapy. I did, but I like therapists more than she did. She didn't really like therapists." He says, "So what are you doing?" He says, "She's telling you she doesn't want to do it. You're a bully. You should listen to her. You're telling her what the two of you need. You're not paying any attention to her at all." And that might seem pretty obvious to all of you who are listening. It was like I couldn't see it until it hit me in the head like a 2x4. And I went home that day and I told him, "Well, maybe we don't need this counseling stuff. Maybe we can work through the last stuff on our own." And her shoulders relaxed and she got a smile on her face. And uh, he's finally listening to me. Holy shit. He's listening to me. So anyway, we did a lot of work. It's enough of that. But I went on and I got very involved, and I was with groups. We had these spiritual weekends, these men's retreats. I'm sure you have them where you live. I got very involved in those committees and working on those retreats, and I get jobs at my home group, and I'm sponsoring people, and things are going along. And my sponsor kept telling me whenever I had the problem du jour, he'd say, "What you need is more spiritual development." I got really sick of hearing it. But what I needed almost every time I have a problem is I need more spiritual development. Um, so time went on. I don't know. I was probably sober 13 years. I think I remember it was 13 years. And I went through this emotional bottom. I don't know what the hell it was, but I was just feeling like really lost and just not connected. And is this all there is? And all this stuff. And then lo and behold, um, out of the blue, I mean, you just heard my story about all the pain I caused. Um, I was 49 years old at the time. I started having a crush on a woman I met through some work thing. And I talked to my sponsor and he said, hey, he says, you've been down this road. He says, but you know, got to get honest with yourself. There was a friend of mine, her name was Charmaine. She's passed away now, but she was a dear friend of mine. And she says, we need to have coffee. And so we went to coffee and she said, darling, she always called everybody darling. She says, you're so in love with your story. She said, isn't it? You feel so bad. She says, you're 49 years old and you're acting like a 14-year-old. You're in love with somebody. He said, let me tell you what I see. And she says, this is, I've heard you. I've sat at tables with you. I've heard you say this at tables, that this emptiness, this hole that you feel in your soul is a God-shaped hole. And the only thing that's going to fill it is a relationship with God. And she says, then I have seen you. She says, you learned that the alcohol and drugs won't do it. And then you started buying stuff. And then you started having success at work. And then you started getting popular in Alcoholics Anonymous. And she says, and now this relationship crap. She says, well, it's all the same. She says, you think you're so unique. There's nothing unique about you. You're just the average garden variety alcoholic. You're looking for something outside of yourself to make you feel better. And nothing will do. You need a relationship with your higher power. And I know you have one, but that's where you need to focus. Now, I mentioned this, it took about 90 seconds to say that. I met Charmaine for coffee every other week for a year. I mean, this does not go fast. It took a while before I learned a lot of this stuff, but I turned a corner. I don't know what else to say. I turned a corner. I mean, it was this surrender of, like God, let God into every area of my life. And not try to hold things back that I manage. My life is unmanageable. My life is still unmanageable, but I have a helper. I have a manager. I'm not alone anymore. And, I got, the years were going by, and I guess just to start to wind down, we got to the pandemic and all the meetings closed down. And Stephen was mentioning one of the guys locally started this men's group in the morning, this Zoom meeting, and boy, we took to that. That was great. And after I retired about 5 years ago. There's a building here. It used to be an Episcopal church, but they used to rent space to AA groups and have meetings there. Well, then the congregation dwindled down to nothing, and now they call the place a Hope Center now. It's not a church anymore, and all they have are recovery meetings, AA and Al-Anon and Alateen and NA and CA and GA. I mean, big place. And I started going to new meetings there, and I found a whole new bunch. People that we got busy, and I was able to start doing those things that I never was able to do before that I wanted to do. Started going to the rehabs and going to Stutzman, which is the local state rehab, and going to ECMC, the county hospital, where they have a detox. Everybody gets detox there, almost everybody, and then the rehab. Going to Salvation Army, going to there's this one woman we knew was a head nurse at the Buffalo Psych Center. There was they had a unit for the criminally insane. Well, probably not a politically correct term anymore. I guess people not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect. These were some criminals. I mean, they had committed some serious crimes, but they were alcoholics and drug addicts. And they had an AA meeting there, and she invited us in, and it was kind of rough at first. I mean, some of these guys were wearing padded helmets so they didn't beat their heads against the wall. I mean, it was kind of a rough crowd, but we went every week, and I can't tell you how much that did for me. I mean, we started liking these people, we started loving these people, and COVID shut it down, and we were all hurt because and we were walking out one day. This guy Rob and this woman Margie were walking out, and Rob looks at me. He goes, "You know the difference between those people and us?" He goes, "This much. You see my fingers real close together. That much. They're just like us, and they're just like us. You know, this disease that we have, and the recovery from it." So I started spending a lot more time doing that kind of work. I like going to rehabs, so I'm on the treatment facilities committee, and I go and I do that stuff, and I'm sponsoring guys, and I have I talked about early steps. I didn't talk much about 6 and 7. I came to a point, and you learn things as you go on. Somebody once told me, "So do you want to spend the rest of your life defending the guy you are, or do you want to become the man you're supposed to be?" Sounded kind of poetic. Look at your behavior, you know. And I remember I started hearing that from, how it is when all of a sudden you become aware of something in AA. You hear 10 people talking about it, right? And this guy sponsor and I, we went through that Drop the Rock book, which I wasn't particularly crazy about, but we went through it, and we started looking real hard, both of us, sort of keeping each other accountable. How are we living? How do we treat the people we live with? It used to be University Men's Group, another local meeting here. Whenever you'd ask how you're doing, some old timer would say, "You want to find out how he's doing? Ask his wife, ask his kids, ask the people he works with. That's how you find out how he's doing." Of course, you know that message. And I used to think if I had a shitty day, it was okay to come home and be a jerk because it's home. You can let down your guard. They got to take it, right? No, they don't. This whole idea of trying to be a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous all the time, every day. That's one of the things I wake up. I ask God in the morning, please help me continue to be an active and sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I tell myself, okay, I'm a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous. How about I act like that today? Why don't I act like that with everybody I meet, and try to be what doesn't come naturally. Try to be calm and gentle and kind and loving and non-judgmental, and all the things, all the things it tells us in our literature about how to live a decent life. And I hear other people say it, but I'm a satisfied customer of Alcoholics Anonymous. I mean, this is my sponsor says that he says I wake up with a new case of alcoholism every day. And I said that at a meeting one day, and some guy jumped down my throat. Page 85 says the problem's been removed. And he started talking about the position neutrality. Yeah, I know. Nobody's going to come and pour a drink down my throat. But I have alcoholism, and I'm not cured of alcoholism. And I really do need to attend to some things to try to maintain this personal relationship with this higher power, this great friend, capital G and F, without whom I'd be lost, and with whom I'm living a great life. And this life that I live it's very simple. I have a simple life. I don't do much. But it's my wife and I spend a lot of good time together, and it is beyond my wildest dreams. So anyway, thanks for listening. Very happy to be here tonight. Thank you.